Live video is starting, and there is going to be this time delay. Hi, how are you, Aaron?
Doing well, Keith. How you doing?
All right, I'm doing well. I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this little thought experiment, this exercise in. I know what my vision and idea behind the nine business models is and how it helps somebody. Um, but me talking about it means I use my words. And thank you for choosing to participate so that people can hear it from someone else's perspective. Um, so what I know that is that you've been using HighLevel for a while, um, but how did you get here? What's your background? What's your experience?
Mhm. Yeah, so I've been in a number of different industries. Spent some time in education, healthcare with healthcare providers, also healthcare with working with payers or insurance companies. Um, Spent a good chunk of time in manufacturing as well. So I've got over 2.5 decades of technology experience, largely in the software engineering space, but also spent about a decade as a product manager, leading teams that were delivering products to our various customers.
Mhm.
But early on, spent a good chunk of time in just more general consulting. And so, in the early days of technology, you're still building out servers. It was a lot more complicated to stand some things up. Now you can pretty much click a button and get one going. But same with, phone systems. And so I started using, IP phones in the early 2000s, and we were using little, desk phones at the time with some of the doctors' offices we had, and lawyers' offices as well. But they had some very early, very basic like application type phones, and smartphones weren't even really a thing, and so it was just some pretty bleeding edge type of technology that was coming out. So I've got all these different pieces and components that I kind of connected together over the years. And the most recent is probably in the healthcare. I spent, like I said, a good chunk of time as a product manager working with primarily insurance companies, but with a focus on analytics and campaign management. And so measuring data that would help us identify, people that needed outreach for whatever the case may be. And so, just kind of all of those experiences, I think, brought me to where I'm at today with HighLevel. The first time I saw it and kind of jumped into it and started understanding it, I thought, this is the product I always dreamed of building. And so
Mhm.
it was very easy to just lean into it in a big way.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Uh, for context for the audience that's listening, um, what we do here in GHL Business Launch is help people who are side hustlers or solopreneurs, or even has someone who has a hobby business and they're trying to figure out how to make that hobby business profitable. And often in the high level space, it looks like a freelancer or a VA. Uh, get from struggling to a stable income. And in the US economy, those tiers are $0 to $3,000, just barely getting by, and $3,000 to $10,000 a month actually being having an actual living income. And then 10,000K a month and up is an agency, a business, a company who's who's doing scaling kinds of things. We don't help people with that. We help people get through these first two tiers. And if you're in a different part of the world, the dollar amounts are probably different, but the tiers are the same. There's this entry level stage where you're unstable, and then there's this stable but struggling, and then there's the ability to scale. But you have to have you have to have the stable income but struggling phase in order to get to where you're ready to scale. We don't help people once they're there. We help people get here. We help people who know they want to do a thing, but aren't quite sure how to move forward doing the thing. Um, and specifically, the concept of the nine business models is a framework for thinking about who you're helping and how you're helping them. So, business model one is saying, I know that, just like Aaron said, HighLevel is an amazing thing. I want to introduce as many people to HighLevel as I can because it'll help them. And it's the hands-off approach to the business because HighLevel provides all of the support. It's totally a valid approach to the business. And if that's the kind of side hustle you want to have, there's nothing wrong with it. Um, if you want to do more than just say, hey, HighLevel is a great thing, figure it out. If you want to say HighLevel is a great thing and I can help you, I can come alongside you and part with you and partner with you. That's what I call business model two, the value added affiliate. Um, Business model three, and for purposes of condensing the conversation, not going to go into the nuances of business model three, four, five, and six, but three, five, and six together are the agencies. Business model three is a SaaS agency, software as a service. You're providing a customized, unique version of HighLevel to a particular audience so that they can solve particular problems. Instead of with business model one and two, they have the software, now they have to figure out how to implement it. Business model three, with your customized white label version or gray label version of HighLevel, you're solving a particular problem. But in the end, it's still a done do it yourself thing for the customer. The customer is taking the software and using it for their business. Business model four done with you. Business model four is a done with you model. Software with a service, SWAS, is here's my customized service and software. And oh, by the way, I'm going to provide some services alongside it. Business model five is I'm going to do most of the services alongside it. Business model six is I have the software, I'm using the software to run my agency, but I'm providing you agency services. Those are the four agencies. What a business model nine person does for someone who's in business model who's the customer in business model one and two, someone who's business model zero, user of HighLevel, the coder is providing apps in the app marketplace that help them solve problems with HighLevel that HighLevel doesn't solve. So what Aaron's going to talk to us about today is how the app gives the ability of the end user of HighLevel to make a thing to make a version of their HighLevel that solves a problem in their unique industry instead of depending on an agency in business model three, four, five, or six to provide that service. Similarly, the business model nine coder is providing to those agencies the tools to allow them to solve their customers' problems. Business model seven is a coach or advisor. This training program it falls in the business model seven category. It's someone who's helping people figure out what to do with HighLevel, design the strategy of how they want to go forward, but not actually doing it for them. Business model eight is a support, and part of that would be asking a coder, hey, my client wants to do this thing. Is there a way to make it do this thing? The coder is the one that actually does the thing. Business model eight is support agencies. Often they look like white label support agencies so that it's transparent to the business model zero client who's actually providing support. It seems like it's the agency, business model three, four, five, or six. Or they might be gray label or parallel, where they're saying the agency is saying the marketing agency is saying, oh, by the way, contact so and so to get tech support. Business model eight is taking the strategy and doing the implementation inside HighLevel to make it work. So building out the automations, building out the landing pages, the funnels, the forms, the email sequences. But when they have a technical problem that HighLevel doesn't solve natively, then they turn around to somebody who's in business model 9 to develop an integration or a code to solve that particular problem because it's not needed to high level. The point of all of that framework, all that context is to say that business model 9 is a behind the scenes kind of person that but is supporting everyone else in the ecosystem, in the sphere of influence. Um, I have had for purpose of leveling the playing field, I have had clients in all 8 of the other business models. I do not have the technical skills to be a business model 9 person. I recognize these people when I see them. And so when I said I need to have this part of the conversation, it's like, who do I reach out to who can show us how that kind of person supports everyone else in the ecosystem? And that's my first choice was Aaron Oliver. So Aaron, thank you for agreeing to join us today. Could you tell us your history with HighLevel, kind of what you have done with HighLevel, who you have supported, and what those kinds of things look like?
Mhm. Yeah, so I started out, I helped some friends acquire a gym, and so started out standing up a high level instance for that initiative as they wanted to do outreach with their members and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of how it all started. I onboarded a few, small clients, friends, and so on. And really, in the early days, was just trying to figure out, kind of what the best fit was. I think like everybody else, they kind of
Hmm.
they either see, a video and see opportunity and pursue the opportunity, or maybe they have some kind of specific need and then realize, okay, there's so much more that could be happening here. And so you got to kind of decide how you want to lean into that or not. My original approach was I was just going to kind of keep it small, be referral only, and try to just help people as needed, but primarily use it for my own initiatives. At the time, was also doing some things in the real estate space, and so it's a pretty powerful solution in that regard as well. Um, and so interacted with some folks that work with dentists. I've done some things with insurance agents, and so there's just a number of opportunities. And because I have
Hmm.
experience all over the place, it's easy for me to lean into some of these things and help people. But I also think, and maybe I've said this to you before, but um, you know, everything in this world's kind of the same, right? And so whether you're dealing with, a student at a school, or you're tracking, a sick person, or whatever the case may be, like a lot of these things are just kind of the same thing. You're solving problems. How you solve a problem might be slightly different, or why you're solving the problem, or how you interact with somebody. You might go this route or that route, but a lot of the things you're going to do to get to a proper solution are going to kind of be the same. And so you got some kind of mess, you need to sort out the mess, make sense of it, and then move the thing forward. And so um, since then, I've done quite a few other things as far as custom apps, or just as you mentioned, some of the white label support agencies. I've assisted some of those primarily on the technical side, whether it be with integrations or other types of more technical services.
Hmm. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I wanted to make sure we highlighted that because of your extensive multiple industries, doing tech support in a lot of different ways, all the way from like building out server stacks and building phone systems for people. Obviously not this kind of phone. I just use it as a visual aid. Um, you bring a problem solving skill set to the table. Um, and I think you said something pretty significant there, where when you said we might be solving a particular problem, a unique problem, and how we do the interactions might be unique, but the problem solving process is consistent, and the kinds of things we do to understand and scope the scale of the problem is similar. There's these patterns that we see in the way we go about doing these kinds of things in the real world. So awesome. Um, I know that there's a potential for people to be very to make some significant amount of money as a coder, as a developer. They have that skill set, turning those skills into an income. Is there's a reason that people there's a reason that people do that for a living, right? Um, However, I think there's also a lot of people who are struggling to turn their skills into income. And um, one of the ways that, in specifically for Business Model 9, for the app developers, one of the ways I see this is there are a large number of apps in the app marketplace. Um, I don't think I think there are a lot that aren't being marketed well. Um, so um, what do you actually I'm a little bit out of sequence in my questions, but we'll come back to how someone builds the business of being in the app marketplace
Mhm.
later. But right now, what do you see as the um I, I'm visualizing it from the outsider perspective. Um and so maybe I'm describing I don't want to misdescribe the problem. Um what do you see as the so my I'm describing the problem from my perspective. I'm saying I see the apps that are in the marketplace. I think they're not marketed well. What do you see as how the developer builds the app that solves a problem and connects the person that has that problem with the app? What do you see as from my perspective, it looks like a missing link, but maybe I'm missing what it looks like
Mhm.
from the developer perspective.
Right. Yeah, so I think there's some, validity into what you're saying. So I think the marketplace is evolving even from, when I first started working with HighLevel. It's come quite a ways, and it continues to evolve just like the core product there. They're constantly adding, features. Just I think a week or two ago they added some new libraries that will, you know streamline some of the development, even make it a little bit easier, make it a little bit cleaner to leverage technologies maybe that you're familiar with, because now you can import it into your own frameworks. The Some of the early models were very, very specific to certain languages as far as the templates and things that were demonstrated, and it was really hard, I think, to find step by step, easy, here's how you do this. But also, a lot of that is, overwhelming to some people, because you're looking at, JavaScript code or whatever type of code that you're trying to write. And so I think last I looked, there were, nearly 1,500 apps or so in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And we'll just note, like, there are, just like on the other side, like, you can have a white labeled version of an app, or you can have a not a white labeled version. So you might explicitly say this is for HighLevel in your app or in your app description. And you might choose to do that intentionally. Your audience is going to be different. It's going to appear differently in the marketplace. And so if they come in on a white label branded domain, then they're not going to see some of those apps that are not flagged as, hey, this is white label. The goal being to try to, keep it, as not known that it's HighLevel as
Mhm.
much as possible. Some people choose to do that. Some people, really lean into it. I've seen even some white labels. It's like they're like, "This is I've went and built this for GHL," and it's like, okay, so they're just pretty, this is what it is,
Yeah.
and that can be a strategy. I'll say,
Mhm.
There's also the ability to have private apps. So you could actually build an app and have it available that it's not public in the marketplace. It's more private. And so there could be some apps being distributed potentially, through those channels that we may not even have visibility
Yeah.
into. Um, and they may be marketed differently. I think the 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 challenge is in some cases, the agency owner has in a white label scenario some ability to control, whether their people see a marketplace, what apps they see, and then they got to decide, do they enable that or not? Do they expose some of these things? Do they restrict certain apps or not certain apps? I think in the early days, and this probably happens in most marketplaces,
Hmm.
there's a lot of, kind of Wild West activity. And so, there's, I've seen some out there. It's like, some of these developers, they got, 30, 40, 50 apps, maybe. I don't know. There's a bunch of them. It's like it does one little tiny thing.
Hmm.
Um, and that's helpful to some people, and there's probably people that, well, hey, I'll pay $1 a month to get some new function in a workflow. Um, but um, I think some of those things will stabilize over time. I know you've had some thoughts in the past about the ability to search, because
Hmm.
I think you can still maybe only search by name. And
Yeah.
so it makes it tricky if you're looking for something that might be buried in a description.
Yeah.
And so, that's one thing to note. Um, and I think just people knowing that there is a marketplace is probably not as obvious, even the ones that can see it. And then what do I do with these things or how do I use them?
Yeah.
I think, and maybe we'll talk about this, in the future or a little bit later, but just in general, like to the average user or customer, like the whole thing can be very much overwhelming. And so
Hmm.
when you start to think, okay, now I need to go do something, there's already too much. Like they
Yeah.
don't know what's what. And so without somebody really guiding them and saying, okay, well, I can drop an app in place, or there's an app over here, we can put that in place. Like that's where I think it's up to, either somebody who's very, I need this, I'm going to go seek it out, and maybe they're
Hmm.
using, HighLevel directly, or they're, white labeling as an agency owner and they need to be a little more thoughtful or proactive in, okay, I can leverage an app to solve this problem. Um, and so there's a lot of variables. It's not that there's one right or wrong, but I think some of
Hmm.
those things contribute to the challenges of people adopting apps and really being aware that they're there and that they can help them.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you hit on, yes, I think that you've heard me talk about the fact that the app marketplace as it exists, the search function is not um as it as robust as we would want it to be. But I think you hit on something really important about the platform as it exists, the high level ecosystem is very complex because, and it's a good thing. It's so complex, overwhelming because it does so much. It is a complete tool shed. It has so much capacity. The trick is to have, and frankly, that's why the business model 7 person I think exists in the ecosphere, is to help somebody decide of all the things you could be doing with high level right now, what is the thing that's going to actually move the needle in your particular situation? Um, uh, and then sometimes it's purely making a workflow that does the thing, and sometimes it's we need to do something complex enough that we need some custom code, and either we need to manually code it and to the whatever expense that is,
Right.
or there's an app in the marketplace already that does the thing. We just need to import it.
Right. And then
Um,
that introduces another probably challenge is, and I don't know other app developers, I don't know what their business looks like as far as, the amount of revenue they're generating from these apps. But you gotta think. what is the marketplace for this app I'm going to go build?
Hmm.
And then is there enough people that will trust me, to do the transaction? And and then how do I close the feedback loop? And a lot of this, all goes back to, the feedback loop really. And how do I know that I've done what somebody else needs, right? Just because
Hmm.
I can build an app doesn't mean that it's going to be, helpful and meaningful to the masses.
Hmm.
And so you got to be thoughtful on some of those things and how do these things scale. And that could, tie into why there's, maybe less. I don't know that there's less attention because I think there's a lot of activity around, and especially in the communities, people talking about, hey, there's an app for this or an app for that. But
Hmm.
that might tie into it is that, some of these apps are more narrowly focused, or
Hmm.
they're pretty rigid in this is how I want to do it, and they're not really robust enough to address the market and say, okay, there's demand for us to change how this feature works. And some of them I've even seen, you go to their website and it's like their website's broken. It's like, it's they're kind of, half put together themselves on some of these things. And so
Hmm.
there's all kinds of factors there, I think, but that would be another thing is the trust.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so um, often I talk, often when I start a conversation with a new person, I end up sending them the link to my video about that's cued off the Bob Berg quote. People, all other things being equal, people people buy from people, not from robots. People buy from people who they know, like, and trust. So when I'm talking to people who are doing cold outreach, the issue is people are trying to go from initial cold outreach to a sale in one step. They're not building, they're not even building know, let alone like, before they're expecting trust. What you just described is the app is in the marketplace. It may in fact do the thing, but how does the developer build the trust in the community that the thing that this is the one of the three or four that do the thing, this is the one to use? I think it's a huge challenge. Um, in I honestly, I think that 1,500 some odd apps in the marketplace that you look for, the couple times that I've looked for specific apps to do specific things, um, the ones I found, I was still not sure they would do the thing. And like you said, you click through the link to the help page, and it just said, I literally have one of the help pages I went to says we provide 24-hour help support. Well, I sent a text message to the help support and said, hey, does this app do what I want it to do? And they sent me a video that says how to install the app. Well, I already saw your video on how to install the app. I'm asking, does the app, if I install it, is it going to do what I need it to do, or is it just going to add more clutter to my already cluttered sub account? Um, and it's not a criticism of that particular company. I'm deliberately not going to name them. Um, I think it's a pattern.
Right.
I'm using it as a micro as a one-off anecdote of the pattern, um, that I think is the challenge for people
Mhm.
people in this, what I call business model nine, the developers. They are really good at solving a technical problem. Sometimes their ability to describe in layman's terms what how that solves the problem and whether it's the correct problem to solve is a gap.
Mhm.
Um, I have the question in my script that says, why would someone pick business model nine as either a primary or secondary source of income if they're in the high level ecosphere? Well, I think in this case, where in the other ones it's really is a serious question. In this one, it's obvious if you have the skills to be a developer, then that would be a reason why you would choose business model 9. Um, the fact that, and then one of the benefits of this business model is the app marketplace exists. Your audience has already self-selected. They've said, I'm your target market. I use HighLevel. That's the target market.
Mhm.
What, Aaron, you just highlighted the fact that not every HighLevel user needs every app. And so the gap in the middle there, from my perspective, is um, how the developer either learns how to market or partners with someone who is a marketer to market to this audience and say, this is how this app solves a problem that your end users have.
Mhm.
Um, what, so I'm going to ask a two-part question. What are the other things that might cause a person to say I should be in-app development or in business model A support versus being a support agency versus being a marketing agency customer facing?
Mhm.
And and at the same time, what are like the risk and benefits or the pros and cons of being someone in that kind of service provider space versus this kind of service provider space as an agency working with clients?
Mhm. Right. So I think a couple thoughts there. So Seth Godin, he's an author, marketer,
Hmm.
very well known speaker.
Yep, I listened to
And
a lot of his stuff.
but he tells a story about in the early days of the internet. He was in book publishing and an author, and he had an opportunity. They came to him. They wanted him to put together a book, and I think the book was called Best of the Net. It was like a phone book for all these sites on the internet, right? This is early days, right? And so
Okay.
but he tells the story like they did this, they had sales team, they launched the book, and it was a giant flop.
Hmm.
Because at the exact same time he's writing a book about all these sites, the best of the net, two guys in a university dorm room somewhere are building Yahoo. And so
Hmm.
these guys went and built a search engine. He wrote a book.
Uh-huh.
And so I think it's important to know like different people are going to perform differently. And so even if you've got um, similar people, the outcome is going to be, in some cases can be very much different. The
Hmm.
person is going to, impact the thing, probably more so than, I solved this problem, right? Like you could
Hmm.
take two different people, have them solve the same problem. One of them is probably going to outperform the other just for variables that the other one might not even want to change. Like maybe he can do it but he doesn't want to. Maybe he
Hmm.
answers 24/7 text messages, but but the other one chooses to send you a link to a video instead of answering the question. I don't know. So but the I think so that's important to note. And I think you really got to just decide like there's so many different ways you could make money developing apps in the marketplace. Um, I think probably the most powerful way is to have something that, complements something you're already doing. So, I've done some work in the membership space. So for, some of these folks that put out content on a
Hmm.
membership. And so,
Hmm.
various industries, say lawn care or otherwise have these templates they might publish on a regular basis. And so it's a way to, sort of streamline some of your social media presence if you don't have a content or marketing person on staff or contract that you can, have them produce custom stuff. You can go, I'm gonna go license this on a membership and then
Hmm.
just kind of get a drip feed.
Uh-huh.
So, you take something like that and integrate it with a custom app, it can be far more powerful than, okay, I've got this thing over here. I'm going to take these assets and then bring them in. I think if you can build a bridge between the two, creates a more meaningful, experience for the users. And if you are the content type person, then, you're able to amplify your business. And so by offering a additional functionality. On the flip side, I think there are companies or businesses that maybe need to support multiple platforms, other CRMs, other
Mhm.
automation tooling. And so if you're already doing that, like it would just be a more natural thing. Like I'm just going to go build an app and drop it in the marketplace because I have a large customer base on HighLevel.
Mhm.
And so that's a thought. I think my gut tells me I don't really have, like I said, a lot of evidence to support this, but my gut tells me if you're just going to lean in, I'm just going to focus solely on HighLevel and I'm going to go build some app. It's probably a little more challenging to turn that into something that's, highly scalable
Mm.
and um something that, will even probably produce sustainable income for a person, just even a solo freelancer
Mhm.
type. And so I think because it's fairly easy to find somebody and it's fairly well documented. And so, somebody who has a problem is going to go find somebody that can solve the problem.
Mhm.
And I've come across that multiple times where I've already got a developer and
Mhm.
okay, well, and maybe he just doesn't know it exists or there's some missing links there. There's also different skill sets with the developers, but it's fairly easy to go find somebody that can build an app. And so, and most people I think are fairly happy uh with I solved the problem rather than I created a beautiful experience and solved the problem. And
Uh-huh.
so it just depends on the person and the use case. I can give you an example. I saw a guy posting he was looking for he wanted to know how people were handling help desk type tickets, from their agency, right? Like, how do you get
Mhm.
your sub accounts to funnel in a ticket?
Mhm.
And so I basically modeled up something for him, and I said, hey, I got something. I can hop on a call and show you. And so hopped on this call. He looked at it for a few minutes, um, and originally like this was an important thing to him, but then he like almost discarded that altogether. And I don't know if it's because he saw what I was capable of or that I was thinking differently. I don't know. But then he pitched another problem to me, and this problem was he was wanting to update Google Analytics anytime he received a spam phone call through an ad or other channel. So if it came in from a Google business profile or some other channel, like he wanted to push that back and say, hey, this phone call was really spam. And he said he was having a VA, analyzing these voicemails because what would happen is they would call in, you'd end up with if it's a really short, like a 1 second, you probably know it's trash, but sometimes you'd end up with a very short little voicemail and you have to listen to it.
The 30-second ones.
Yes, and so he he's like, I'm having somebody has to comb through all these. It's a big problem. And I was like, okay, let me look at it. I didn't even know at the time if you could do it.
Mhm.
There were some ways to do it. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't documented. It wasn't obvious. But I ended up, putting together a little orchestration. Basically, what happened is when the call came in, it made a call out, and you could obtain the duration
Mhm.
from some of the details. And this is over a year ago. And so put it all together, showed it to him, and he's like, "That's exactly what I need." And I gave him a very inexpensive price.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Whoa, I had no idea how much that was going to cost. It was less than $1,000." And I'm thinking, you told me you're paying somebody to comb through all these voicemails on a consistent basis. And so, you're gonna have to think through some of those things and decide, can you put something together if you don't have a product like you know, uh, Canva or Adobe that you own, some kind of
Mhm.
product, some of these other platforms that maybe will tie in. There's some things in various industries, a lot of IDX type stuff I think that's out there that, some of these that are either custom or, specific to a company. So
Mhm.
if you're not already in that space and you're just like, I'm going to go build an app to try to make money, you probably need to find something that is used at scale already
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and build what I would call like a point solution. How can I build a bridge to some of these other platforms? For
Mm-hmm.
example, you and I chatted about this right before they added the Google Drive integration,
Mm-hmm.
about a year ago, I guess.
Yep.
You and I had talked, and I was working on something similar.
Yep.
I think there's still probably a need for it in some cases because there are other drives that I
Mm-hmm.
think people want to tie in, not just Google. But if you could build something like that where it solves a problem that isn't likely to be solved in the
Right.
foreseeable future,
Right.
and there's a lot of people using it, then you
Mm-hmm.
can scale it and generate some income. The challenge in that is going to be, you know, what is somebody willing to pay for it,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have to compete with that, and so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good description of what I think. One of the easiest things about this particular business model is you can find the problems by going on the ideas board and seeing what people have written.
Mhm.
There's a handful of votes, but because so few people engage with the ideas board, the votes aren't high enough to get action on the roadmap. Um, I've seen people take that two ways. One, they've spent so long trying to make a perfect, beautiful customer experience version of the app that they're trying to build,
Mhm.
that by the time they actually do implement it, HighLevel does in fact put that thing on the roadmap and implement it, or they do invest the effort and they build it, and then HighLevel accelerates development and HighLevel then does the thing natively. So it's a two-edged sword where people are describing what they want, want the integrations to be. The question is how, because there are ideas that have been on the ideas board for 5 years. There's there's not a lot anymore, but there are quite a few that have been on the ideas board for 2 or 3 years and little to no action. The challenge for the developer is if you start moving forward to take action, does that become overcome by the fact that HighLevel then turns around and develops the native version of it? Um,
That's the risk, you're gonna have
yeah.
to weigh and then decide, when and if that happens. Like even on the current, integration with the Google Drive,
Hmm.
I think there's some more opportunity, I think. And so
Hmm.
it's a matter of, you know, when you do something like that and then they come along and okay, we added our own thing, you know, you got to really understand the market and know what's good enough. And to your point, don't spend forever building the thing. Get something out there, what we would call minimum viable product,
Uh-huh.
and get it out there, start generating some, income so that you can, fuel future development. If they do
Hmm.
come out with something, there will always, I think, be people that are going to, I'm already using this, it's already in place. I
Hmm.
trust you, like you're thoughtful, like your version's more meaningful, or you listen to my feedback, you
Hmm.
can respond quicker. And so I think there's always room for competition. I think it's just a
Yeah.
matter of finding something that
Yeah.
you're comfortable with and being able to scale it.
Yep. And to that note, one of the things that I say to people about when I have new prospects, new clients, I people say, "Well, can I get a snapshot from you?" And I say, "Sure." What we aren't going to do is do a snapshot of my agency account because my agency account at this point is 5 years old, and it's some of the things that are in it were not even the best practice. They were the only way to do a thing then.
Right.
Well, it's still working. It's not broken, so I'm
Mhm.
not going to fix it. But then I
Right.
imported this other snapshot and I imported this other particular workflow and I particularly imported. Now I've got this accumulation of all these things and it's
Mhm.
working for what I
Mhm.
need.
Right.
But I wouldn't, none of that would I do for someone else that way now
Right.
with the capabilities I have. To your point, some of those things, the way they're working, is using someone else's technique, and I'm not going to change it just because now there's a better way to do it because it's working. If I have somebody's app and it's working and it's accomplishing what I'm gonna and what I needed to do at a price point that's reasonable, and I'm getting support from them that's better than what I would get from high level support, then I continue to use that, even though high level has a native version, especially since we know that high level has a tendency to launch minimum viable product versions, which then languish at the minimum viable product level. So if someone comes in and says, I can launch this and I can keep improving on this because I'm really good, narrowly focused on doing this thing, they can still have a long-term product that's sticky in the
Hmm.
space.
Right.
Awesome. So we've got about 15 more minutes. Um, I'm not on a tight timeline. I can go over a little bit, but I want to respect your time. I want to respect the audience's time. Um, if someone's looking at how do I either provide agency services, not in the business model one and two affiliate version, but if I want to build a SaaS, if I want to provide agency services as a business model five or a business model six, or if I want to do support agency business model eight, business model nine kind of services, how do they get help from you to learn how to do those kinds of things?
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of we talked about. I sort of early on was a little more narrowly focused in my approach, and that was intentional. And wanted to be kind of referral only. Um, and then through a series of events, I decided, okay, I am going to launch my own SaaS that might scale to a level, and I'm gonna do it in a way that's more premium, white glove, but not the high end premium cost. And so I started designing out what would that look like, right? And so what would it look like for, an agency to onboard 100 people in a week with, one or two people team, right? Or a
Mhm.
person in a BA or something like that. Could you even accomplish that and do it at scale? And at the time I had a lot of things with the family and other stuff, so it was like I wanted to make sure that I controlled my time and boxed it. And so I set out to design that. And some of that came from just interacting with other agency owners.
Mhm.
There's some in particular. They were chatting with me. They were wanting to do something, similar where they were gonna, basically stand up some salespeople and kind of scale on an autopilot. And they were looking for somebody that could, help rapidly onboard. And as I listened to them, it became clear like they either didn't hadn't thought it through as far as like what does it look like to onboard a single customer, or they just valued the personal interaction, which is
Mhm.
fine one-on-one type, and that can be very powerful to extract extra value and those types of things, either way. And but they were kind of very focused on, hey, we're gonna at least spend 30 minutes with every client we onboard, and the only way to do that's really human power.
Mhm.
And at the time, depending on how fast I scaled, I could have helped them scale, but um, I had access to an agency for VAs, and I had trained most of them, and so we probably could have helped them scale pretty quickly had they done it. But we ended up moving on different directions, and that's fine too. Um, but they nicknamed me the wizard. They said every tech guy needs a nickname, and so we're gonna call you the wizard. And so I developed my blueprint, I developed my model, and and designed it out and scaled to a level in my own agency. And um, as you know, like I was interacting quite a bit in the community, helping other agency owners, and I sort of found, though there can be other challenges, but I sort of found like that was that was where I thrived in, to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
was being able to help people see things that they probably weren't even aware of or didn't know could be a thing. Um, because even for like an agency owner who's got full access to everything and even access to some training and knows what they're dealing with, and so they can YouTube it to find out how do I do this or that. It can be overwhelming, and even when you go on YouTube, like the information can vary, right? And so you say there's 9 business models. I saw a video the other day. The guy said there's 8. I don't know. He's missing one, I guess. Um,
Well,
but
at, to that really quick. At one
yes.
point, I had 15 and I was getting approaching 18,
Mhm.
and I realized at some point you become so granular
Right.
that you're artificially constraining each one.
Mhm. Right.
So it's how, but what I had figured out was 5 and even 6 isn't complete. It doesn't give you enough
Mhm.
nuance.
Right.
And so I came to 9.
Mhm.
Um,
It's a good number.
I'd love to see this guy's list of 8 and see if
Yeah.
I
I'll
agree,
have to.
disagree. For one thing, when I started laying it out initially, I split pure affiliate and value added affiliate, and we're not going today into the nuance between
Mhm.
the
Right.
two.
Right.
Um, but it has to do with target audience.
Mhm.
Um, the point is, I 7, 8, 6, 12,
Right.
somewhere in that range. Yeah, I get
Mhm.
it.
Right. Yeah. Now, the other thing is I saw a video the other day that this looked like a young guy said, I'm going to show you every feature in high level there is. And his video was 30 minutes long. And I thought
Yeah.
30 minutes, maybe 30 hours or maybe 30 days. Like th this tutorial is gonna take, way more time than you're giving us, kid. So I didn't watch the video, but maybe he did at a high level cover everything. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But
Only
the
at a high level.
and I don't know what his goal of the video was. That might have
Uh-huh.
been his point. It might have been funnel into something else.
Uh-huh.
But the point is, um, I've just seen so many people just kind of struggle with different things, and there's a lot of good stuff out there, and I think the part that even people struggle with, like I met a guy, he was in some kind of mastermind or some kind of group and this guy was impressive. Like he was a tech guy and didn't really know sales. So like he gave up his tech job and went and did sales for an entire year just so he could learn sales. And then once he had those skills, he decided I'm going to start up an agency, I guess. And so he was like kind of new to high level, and we hopped on a Zoom and I'm chatting with him and and he was kind of wrestling with like what do I do? And so he's like I got this idea or that idea, and one of them was I think probably one of the more common ones, a missed call text back. Go sell a missed
Mhm.
call text. And but how do you sell that? Like, and I think one of the traps people fall into is how do you sell anything? And they get caught up in, oh, here's 100 things. Let me show you how everything this thing can do, rather than I'm going to sell for this particular problem. And so,
They're trying to sell their product, and
Mhm.
no one has a how do I buy your product problem. They have a problem that
Right,
your product might be the solution to, but that's what
right.
you have to sell. You sell the solution to their problem. Don't sell your product.
Right, right. And so, this has kind of been a developing idea I've had is how do I take what I know and what I've done, because I
Hmm.
did to a degree validate, that my model worked. Last year
Hmm.
around Black Friday, I helped an agency owner. We did roughly 30,000 or so in sales in a few week span over Black Friday, and that was in addition to something they already had, so it wasn't from scratch, but it validated that this is achievable whether you have a small audience or not. And so
Hmm.
how do we help people better understand some of these things? I've wanted to get into the course. We started the site, or I started the site last year, and really the goal was for it to be a hobby. I thought I might produce like one video a week or something, on the go how level,
Hmm.
and answer questions for people. Um, Show them. Go ahead.
Is Go How Level still a viable brand?
It is, and I've been thinking through what to do with. There was such a surge at the beginning. I was like, well, that's a little overwhelming. Like had like 18 questions submitted the first day, and I was planning on answering like one a week or something. And so I'll probably weave the two together. But what I was gonna say is, for today, like if people want to get in touch with me, they can go to wizardofwhitelabel.com, and that's a new thing I'm launching here in the near future. October, we're going to have more of a private type community with courses, but also, I just thought like, what's the better way to do this? You know, demonstrate it. And so let me go do this thing live and produce the receipts in real time and expose it to anybody that wants to follow along. And so we're going to have live Q&As in addition to course material. But at the same time, in parallel to this, I'm going to start a brand new clean brand that has no customers, no revenue from scratch and scale from, 0 to 10
Zero.
customers to 100 to 1,000 customers, whatever we get to. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to, expose the tactics that I am employing to scale this thing and to gain customers. And so there will be, regular multiple per week daily recap type updates where I'll hop on and describe some of the activity that I did and what that did or didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Cold email might be a valid strategy, but should I run cold email through my HighLevel sub account, or should I use some third party service to do that? How do I warm my mailbox? Is there one warming service that's better than another? So, in addition to doing that, I'm going to show people how to test and validate ideas. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but then also measure the results. And then, we'll see how it goes. But from my experience, I know that we will also be able to demonstrate like that. Sometimes you might have a valid idea that might not produce on your timeline, but down the road, somebody's going to show up out of somewhere. Like I had a message on Facebook at one point last year, guys messaging me, "Hey, do you have this service?" I'm like, "Where'd you find me?" He's like, "I found some comment you left somewhere," and it was like a obscure comment I left, somewhere, and he stumbled upon it and reached out to me, and I was in the
It
middle of
was
something.
it was the thing that it was the just the kind of thing that made created trust. No,
Mhm.
like trust. Sometimes it is just a little thing
Right,
in the right context,
right,
but yeah,
but
but obvious, but it's just a comment. Rarely does that work by itself, but once in a while it does.
right. And so the crazy thing too is like this is a larger community. I think like maybe 15,000 at the time, and people all over.
Hmm.
And so happened where I was standing that day, I was like 12 miles from where he lived. And so I said, he's like, let's connect on Monday. I said, well, better yet, let's just have lunch on Monday because I'm right here by you. And so we ended up having lunch, but and that turned into, to some other things. But all that to say is, we're going to go through all these different tactics. How do we do this or that? And then, kind of demonstrate and let people see what works or doesn't work, but then also get a real sense of what they actually might prefer over something they see on a YouTube video that maybe is just an example, maybe doesn't have the this actually worked and here's why it worked kind of explanation
Hmm.
behind it.
Hmm.
And this is what this did. This actually worked a little better. Maybe it's, Facebook ads, maybe it's not. But in addition to that, the live interactions, in the private community, Q&A, and
Hmm.
let people just show up and interrogate me, ask me anything about why I did what I did or
Hmm.
how it worked or,
Hmm.
how they might apply it to there and see if we can help
Yeah.
some of these others scale from zero or just get out of the I'm stuck mode. What do I do?
Hmm. Yeah. And I think so because we have had a little bit of discussion about what you're planning to do. I think the power of you saying, I got all my other things that are going and they're going and they're doing what they're doing. I'm gonna take this one. I'm gonna start this one from zero, and I'm gonna show you behind the curtain exactly what I'm doing when I'm doing it. Um, that thing that you just said about the question that I want to queue up for the audience is, how would I modify it for my situation?
Mhm.
Because I'm never going to be Aaron, right? I'm also never going to be Fred Flintstone or
Mhm.
Barney Rubble,
Right.
right? I should not try to do, I should never try to pretend that I'm Barney Rubble.
Mhm. Right.
Um, I should always be me.
Mhm.
But I can learn from all these other people and all these other examples and say, and then the question I need to ask myself and then to the person is, I see what you're doing. How can I apply that to my situation? Here's my situation.
Mhm.
And if I think based on what you're planning to do, opening the curtain, saying from ground zero, step by step, this is exactly what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
Mhm.
If people come in with the attitude of, Aaron, how do I apply your example to my situation? I think if they come in with that lens, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for powerful learning
Right.
on their behalf.
Right. And so we're going to build an extremely robust catalog of content. And so we're going to have, there's lots of courses out there, and I'm not saying mine's better or worse, but there's going to be, course type material. This is how you do this in HighLevel. This is how you would do this as an agency owner. And to complement that, this is how I did this in real time, and this is what it did for me.
Mhm.
And this is what it didn't do for me. So I pivoted and went this direction. And so you're going to have multiple things that are not just here's a video tutorial. Okay, here's a video tutorial. Here's the video explanation of how I applied this and what the results were. But then here's also, two or three or four referenced Q&A Zoom calls with people in the community that also tried it and how they interacted with me, or whoever's there, discussing like what their challenges were, or maybe it works better in a different region, or maybe it works better in a different, when I was doing healthcare stuff all the time, my customers asked me, and we were primarily dealing with insurance companies, but they would ask me, what are your other customers doing? And I said, well, I can tell you kind of best practices and what I would suggest, but what they're doing is really not relevant, because an insurance company who's trying to reach an elderly person in Ohio in the wintertime, northern Ohio especially, versus somebody who's in Miami or southern Florida, like you want them to come to an appointment in the middle of the winter, you're going to get a different type of response, because they're going to be likely to not get out in the cold, depending on weather and other things. So it everybody's mileage varies to some degree based on all the
Mhm.
different variables.
And
And
that's just in
so,
the US. Yeah.
right. And so your best practice is really a framework of how do I build, measure, and then learn from what I just did,
Hmm.
and repeat that process until I fine tune it to, okay, now I got this thing dialed in and I'm able to scale.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Um,
Yeah, so there's a form if you go there now. If you just want to contact me for whatever reason, you can fill out the form. But the form is more specifically for to join a wait list. And so
mhm.
what I'm planning on doing is um, I'm planning on um, opening up to the they'll still be behind a wall. You have to be on the list to get the invite. But the first few weeks, even before, like even here at the end of September, probably later in this week or starting next week, I'm just going to start holding some open Zoom calls for people that are already in, and so we can get some interaction going and just start documenting some of the things I'm doing right now as I lay the foundation for this new brand that I'm going to be launching.
Yeah, awesome. And that's on the Wizard of White Label website.
Yes, wizardofwhitelabel.com.
All right. And that's in the chat in the comments on the video already. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for your
You're
time.
welcome. Thank you.
audience, thank you for hanging out with us for more than an hour at this point. We provide this weekly training environment as a way to give the community things to think about as they decide what is the right thing for each of them, um, for your business, and to give you a context for asking questions about, um, if I'm in the business model of business life cycle stages of 0 to 10K per month, plus or minus whatever is an appropriate number, and whatever number is relevant to your particular local economy. Um, how do I, what question do I ask to get myself unstuck? Because so many people are stuck either in the illusion of permanence, the ditch of sunk cost fallacy, trying to do a thing just because they were told to do a thing, even though it's not working, or they're stuck because they're bouncing from shiny object to shiny object, and one guru is telling them this, and the other guru is telling them that, and both this and that are valid options for the person who's giving them, but they aren't necessarily valid options for you, for me. What we're doing here is helping you sort through all of the detail, all of the examples, all of the different experiences that other people have, and see how it applies to you. Um, we're doing these trainings to give you a context for asking questions that clarify things for yourself so that you can move forward, so you can get unstuck. Um, I've at this point had guest hosts, guest presenters for the last 9 weeks. Skipped 1 week, so 10 weeks in calendar time. Um, Next week, I'm going to do a kind of summarization referencing this series, and then for the end of September, we'll kind of do a wrap up and what the training focus going into October, into the um, last quarter of the year, and at that point, a year of doing this training. We honestly don't know yet. So I expect to still have this slot on my calendar, doing a live training in this Facebook group. What the agenda will be, what the focus will be, um, whether it will shift to a interview podcast, whether it will um, be more high level technical, whether it will be more hobby business, side hustle, business launch focus. We don't know yet. We look forward to audience participation is welcome. You give some feedback on what would be helpful to you. Um, and how it ties in with Devin's business is part of the factors, because um, Devin's focus is shifting to his agency as opposed to his business coaching side of his business. Um, so thank you all for taking 60, 70 minutes of your life. On the replay, you probably play at double speed, so more like 30 minutes. Um, and listening to Aaron's presentation on, if you have the skills to be a coder, then how you turn that into a profitable business. And going forward, if you want to have a support agency, if you want to have a SaaS agency, and you want to follow along with Wizard of White Label, um, absolutely, I encourage you to do that. The tab is open on my screen to sign up. So before I close my operations for today, I'll be on Aaron's wait list. You all have a great day. I'm going to see if I can stop live over here on the Facebook side.